Well, hello and welcome to My Sports Dietitian. My name is Rashonda Thornton. I'm a part of the My Sports Dietitian organization, sports dietitian myself. And what I want to do, this topic for today is going to be talking about performance-based snacking for athletes. Now, when we think about athletes, it can go from the gamut of anywhere from gymnastics to track to football to baseball to golf to tennis. So there's an array of different levels of athleticism. And when it comes to our intensity, and even the environment that which we're in our sports, it's really important to know what's the best place for us as athletes. So we're going to just dive in deep into like what that eating looks like and how to know the difference between the different types of eating we need to have depends on our intensity level and our sports. So I'm going to start off introducing myself. So as I said earlier, my name is Rashonda Thornton. I am a sports dietitian, but I also hold a lot of other aspects to nutrition. I have a private practice out here in St. Louis. And I also do a lot of things in my business outside of the consulting. I work with athletes and I guess exercise-centered people on a regular basis, but I also work on a larger scale with fire departments, armed forces, and university with their athletes. I also do some other things in regards to media. I'm the nutrition expert here in St. Louis, done over 80 segments. I've been a TEDx speaker, and I also host a pod show called The Dietitian Against Science, along with being also an author of a book called Play to Win the Food Fight. So that's a little bit about me. I'll give you just an array, but now we're going to dive into what it is we're going to talk about in this session today. So what we want to learn is going to be our focal points. We're going to first the importance of healthy snacking, the timeline of healthy snacking. When is the best time to snack? In between our practices, in between meals, when do we make sure we're having enough snacks? And then thinking about depending on our exercise intensity, that's going to discern how much fuel we need. So we're going to talk about light, moderate to more heavier snacking. What about training day snacking when we're having 2-a-days or we have days when we are having a longer day of exercise or training and we need to make sure we're properly fueled? We're going to also go a little bit deeper and talk about different types of fueling. So we got carbohydrates, one of our main source of fueling, but we also want to know how to discern between the whole grains and refined grains. So we're making sure that we're giving that longevity of fueling that we need as athletes. And then we're going to provide you guys with some examples so you know what to piece together when it comes to your respective sports. So the big question is, why is it important? A lot of times as athletes, I know growing up myself, I didn't eat enough. And so a lot of times we may be really, really good at our skill or our sports, but we probably don't know we're hindering our ability to optimize our activity or our skill set or our sport because we're not getting the proper or enough fueling. So when it comes to why snacking is so important, yes, we need our larger meals. We need those little guys in between. It kind of keeps our blood glucose levels maintain our blood glucose levels so they don't go and drive up too high and they don't dip. And we also want to keep our energy levels high. We want to keep kind of fueling our body over the time period of a day so we don't have those days where we're sluggish. We don't have those times where we're sluggish and when we're slow. And sometimes we miss a snack or we miss a meal, it causes a backlash of heavy or overeating afterwards in respect to that, because we haven't really fed ourselves. So we're wanting more food and we sometimes tend to overeat. So how do we make sure we have these snacks that allow us to make sure that we're having evenly balanced meals throughout the day? So we're not going with the overeating and we're not keeping our blood sugars level and make sure our energy levels are appropriately high. So the snack timeline, it is about timing. We don't want to have a bolus amount of food at one given day and not have enough through the rest of the day. We need to make sure we keep a consistency of certain nutrients in throughout the day. One that's very important is our protein. You got to think about what protein is. It helps build the body. So if you're training, you're working out, what is intentional as far as strength training, whether you're just training in practice, you're utilizing your muscle tissue, which means you're shredding your muscle tissue, you're tearing it because you're putting resistance on it. So we want to make sure how we're repairing our muscle tissue. We build muscle when we bring in the nutrients to help build it and replenish it. So when we're tearing muscle in our activity, we want to make sure we are finding ways to be replenishing it. And we're doing that by making sure we're having protein throughout the given day. So we want to make sure our protein intake is pretty consistent. We don't want to overdo it in one part of the meal and not have enough in another part of the meal. We want to have it evenly distributed throughout our meals. Also carbohydrates. We want to make sure, we have the right carbs when it comes to simple carbs in specific times of our day. especially in front of workouts. We want to make sure that we do get that amount, depending on what type of workout, but we want to make sure that we are having some level of simple carbs when needed, but mostly knowing that complex carbohydrates are going to be the main carbohydrate we want to start engaging. Those are the ones that have more fiber in it. Those are the ones that a little bit slow burning allows you to maintain your energy levels a little bit longer. Also, when it's the best time to have fat. There are strategic times to have fat, and there's strategic times to not bring in heavy fats in our foods. So it depends on what sport you're playing. Again, it depends on what dynamic of these type of nutrients or these types of snacks that you need. So again, just make sure our protein is consistent because it helps to build our body. Make sure those carbohydrates really sits around the refueling and replenishing of our muscle tissue as well, but also more so for fueling it. And make sure we're bringing in fat when we need, especially for those more endurance types of sports. So let's talk about training day snacks. This is why we are in, the day of our practices. Sometimes we have one practice a day, sometimes it's two. So regardless, we want to make sure we still separately and appropriately fuel before and after those training days. So make sure we have something before we work out. I always say, if you don't put fuel in your car, it can only go so far. If you don't put the nutrients that your body needs in your body, you can only work out so much. You can only run so fast. You can only jump so high. So your body is limited by the types of fueling or the amount of fueling you're getting it. So you want to make sure you're pre-fueling your snacks. You want to provide quick energy. When it comes to simple carbs, you get quicker energy out of simple carbohydrates, but there's still several healthy simple carbohydrates. So I'm not really saying like candy or muffins. We're thinking things like fruit. Those are some of your simple carbs. You want foods that are actually higher in protein, not a heavy amount of protein, but there is some protein involved in that snack. And you don't want to really bring in fat if it's not necessary. We do want to make sure we have some fat in, but we want to make sure it's not overly loaded with fat, because fat doesn't provide the type of fueling we'll probably need for those training bouts. After we work out, so after we shred the muscle tissue, after we move the body, we put the body through a lot of work, we need to make sure our body heals, repairs, and rebuilds appropriately so that our body can be ready to go the next day and be able to perform at the same tier or not higher. So make sure that the purpose of the post-workout snacks is to help repair those muscle tissues. We want to now focus on more higher protein source because we need to replenish and repair the muscle tissue with protein. We do now want to focus on those complex carbohydrates because we don't really need the carbs for fueling as much anymore like we do simple carbs. We need something that's going to take a little bit longer to break down, which kind of helps to supply the needed nutrients for your muscle tissue so they can heal at a quicker rate. And again, if you see the common trend, lower in fat. Sometimes there are places where fat is needed and there's places where fat is not. So just overall focusing on lower fats, just generally as an athlete. And then again, there are times we do need to bring more healthier fats independent of our activity. So let's focus on what the benefits of pre-workout snacks are and what are the benefits of post-workout snacks on training days. So here's some ideas. Here's some examples. So we talked about the more simple carbs. We talked about, some protein sources. We talked about making sure that we are bringing in more carb-heavy snacks. Thinking about the combinations, here are some great examples. If you look at it, these are simple foods that you can probably find in your pantry. There's no magic type of food combination. It's really focused on how we're getting in carbs that are simple and it's not high in fat, and sometimes provide some protein when needed. So we have a banana and peanut butter. We have a toast and bagels. Those are great. Put some peanut butter on your bagel. Put some cream cheese on your bagel. Oh, we have pretzels and goldfish. Those are more lighter snacks. Sometimes we need lighter snacks. Sometimes we need heavier snacks. And we'll talk about that in a few moments. A good combination is Greek yogurt. You have your carbs and your proteins in there, and it's a low fat. So that's like a perfect combination before you work out. Fruit, as I said earlier, is one of your most common fueling sources, or applesauce. Fruit snacks and energy shoots. So these, again, something that's quick that can be converted to glucose on a quicker rate so that your body can use that for its activity. Some post-workout snacks. We're going to lean more heavier on protein and complex carbohydrates. So Greek yogurt parfait. Again, the Greek yogurt is what's giving us the protein we need. The parfait has typically got nuts and granola in it, which is a complex carbohydrate. Chocolate milk, that's a great example. Protein shakes, obviously that's one of our popular ones. Think about just a sandwich. You have a cheese, deli, and meat sandwich. You have your carbohydrates, your whole grain carbohydrates, your protein from your meats and your cheeses, and that combination right there will suffice your needs for a repair. Hard-boiled eggs is a quick one that you can have on the go. Milk and oatmeal. Milk is obviously one of the protein source, and the oatmeal is a complex carbohydrate. And think about things, snacks, tuna and crackers, tuna and vegetables. The tuna is the protein, the crackers and the vegetables, those are your more complex carbohydrates. So if you, so if you notice, proteins and complex carbohydrates on one side, more simple, higher carbohydrates centered on the left side with some protein here and there. But again, you don't see a lot of fat as one of the major contributions to some of these snacks. So now let's talk about the snacks, because it all depends on what you're doing. If you're running a marathon, it's different from if you're playing, a basketball game, or if you're running for 2 miles versus running for 20 miles. So let's talk about like the types of snacking that's needed depending on your activity. So light snacking is good for days off when you're not having those training days, or it's during the weekend and you're not really working out as hard, or you're not planning your games. So those are days we want to make sure our snacks are lighter. Now, when we are training, depends on our level or intensity and duration, we want to start from moderate snacking. Sometimes that's where there's a spectrum to we want to increase to more heavier if when needed. So again, it depends on your sport. If you're doing, if you're in football, that's more of a high volume, higher intensity sport. So yes, we're gonna need heavier snacking. If you're doing something more, let's say like tennis, or you're doing something more like, let's say track, where you're running a little bit longer distance, you're not running, your intensity level is not as high. So your snacking needs to kind of line up with that. So remember, it's all about your intensity, of your training, the frequency, the volume, and endurance. So now let's define kind of how that matches with certain activities. So what to consider light snacks? Well, as I said earlier, fruit is one of the best ones. It's, most fruits are 98% water, very hydrated, it breaks down very quickly. You can do dry fruit. Definitely you don't want to have too much dry fruit, because a dry fruit is equivalent to one regular size fruit. So, even a handful of dry fruit is enough to give you that fueling. Think about veggies. It's something that's light. They have more starchy vegetables too that will probably give you some more carbohydrates in that. Graham crackers, regular crackers, think about our beans, chickpeas, garbanzo beans, black beans, Greek yogurt. If you notice, it's kind of Greek yogurt by itself. So these like real light snacks to have in the days that you're not training on those days. So think about no training, let's have lighter snacks. And I see we have some questions coming and going, so I want to make a point to answer all the questions as much as I can at the end of our talk. So please feel free to ask questions along the way as we're continuing to go. So let's say we are having that day we're working out, and maybe it's game day, and maybe we're training, but really not training as hard because we know we need to get our body ready for that day. What kind of snacks do we need to have now? Now we want to bump it up a little bit. We want foods that have a little bit more carbohydrates, a little bit more complexity to our carbohydrates, and bringing sure there is maybe more solid foods versus more softer foods. So an apple string cheese stick, that's your carb, and that's your protein. You got your graham crackers with peanut butter. So yes, peanut butter is a fat. It also carries protein. And depends on how much peanut butter we're having. We can moderate how much protein, how much peanut butter we're eating. So we don't have to have a whole lot of peanut butter to suffice our needs. But we're having them with the graham crackers. And think about trail mix. That's a great combination. You got your nuts and you got your dried fruit. They're easy to grab and pop in your mouth. It is a little bit more dense in calories, but it may be needed, again, if you're doing sports that you are working out that day. It just may not be at the highest level, but you need some sort of fueling. And again, now the yogurt parfait is simply Greek yogurt, with now you're adding maybe some fruit to it, or adding some granola to it. Now, what about those days when the training is really heavy? You have 2-a-days, or you are just, you're training for 3 or 4, probably not 3 hours, but let's say you're training for more than 2 hours, and you really need some snacks between. It's really going to suffice your replenishing your energy levels that you just depleted, make sure you're ready to go for the next time. Now we get into more larger types of foods. As far as heavier, we got our sandwiches, we got cheese and crackers. Now we got omelets, let's say for breakfast. Stack the omelets with veggies and put some stuff in it to give it some more umph. And we also think about your whole grains. Quinoa is great because you mix quinoa, which is a whole grain, with fruit. Now you're actually getting more heavier carbohydrates. That's more complex. But again, now we're talking about, this is when we're having our more heavier types of activity. We need to suffice higher amounts of calories and carbs, even proteins for that matter, to suffice those needs. So here's an example, a day of moderate training. So let's just say this is a day that you may have a game that day, you may have a little bit of practicing beforehand. So like there will be some hardcore playing, but it's not as intense as training day. So here's an example. We have our oatmeal with our berries and a hard-boiled egg. Again, that's our complex carbohydrate with some simple carbs and a protein. Again, a snack, the graham crackers and peanut butter. Another snack is apple and string cheese. And another snack later on nighttime could be a yogurt parfait. Even after you work out, your body's still breaking down. It's still needing calories to help suffice what you just lost to replenish your glycogen stores, to replenish your muscle tissue. So even after doing some time, it's still okay to have a snack, as long as it's intentional and it's towards the rebuilding and the healing of your body after your exercise activity. So if you see your major meals like your lunch and your dinner, they're more so protein centered. That is the first ingredient. And then we got the whole grains. So we have the bread or the greens. We have something with it. We have our nice starch amount, and then we also make sure we have our vegetables. So again, this is like a great, like ideal day for moderate training. And that's kind of a half meter between light training and heavier training. So that should give you an example, just kind of where it sits in the middle. So now we're going to discern between whole grains and refined snacks. So again, we want to remember what the purpose is. We want simple snacks sometimes as our pre-workout because it breaks down quicker and it allows our body to utilize the glucose so that our body can move and work at its highest capacity. I'm definitely not saying, let's bring in candies and, high sugar sodas and things like that. We don't need that type of simple sugar, but we do need to kind of can break down and give us quick energy, digest quickly in our body. It can cause highs and lows in our blood sugar, which is important to where we're making sure the simple sugars is something like fruit. It's something like, maybe fruit juice. We don't want to have like a cookie or candy as our simple sugar because that's going to bring our blood sugars level up high very quickly. And if it goes high, then it's definitely coming down very quickly. So again, we want to prevent the highs and lows. We want to maintain our glucose levels, not bring them up at too high amounts and drop them down to low amounts. And we want to make sure we have them within a good amount of time before your training. You want to create time for your foods, your sugars, your carbohydrates, so your simple sugars to break down so that it can convert to that glucose that your body can use. So there's everyone's a little bit different and what their timing, but I would say anywhere from 45 to 15 minutes, give and take, it depends on your digestion. That's when you want to kind of bring in that fruit or that simple carb because that'll give enough time to break down and convert over where it won't be sitting in your stomach. And again, everyone's digestive system is a little bit different. So if you feel you need that 45-minute window, take the 45-minute window. If you feel like you have to within 15 minutes and then within 15 minutes you're ready to go, take the 15 minutes. And again, it may even change. So just kind of test it out, see how you feel, and you decide what window works best for you. When you're thinking about whole grains, now we want to make sure that some of our foods are centered more in whole grains because that's going to give us longevity in our energy source. Sometimes a quick energy is good, but we may still want to couple it with a complex carb so it doesn't just shoot our, we get a high amount of energy and it drops. We want to make sure that, depends on what we're doing, we're bringing in the complex carbohydrates when needed. Like I said, opposite of simple sugar, it evens out our blood sugar levels and it digests a little bit slower in our system. So again, we need some things that digest quickly so it can convert into sugar, depends on what our activity is. But there's some activities, i.e. endurance sports, where you're cycling or running, or you're just doing sports, your inactivity will take you an hour plus or even 2 hours to perform. We need we need the type of fuel that's going to be able to give you that fuel into that span of time. So again, you want to be able to gauge, you want to make sure you're bringing in a complex, a whole grain, but if it's something too heavy, like if sometimes heavy bread or, or heavy bagels too much, then, okay, we don't want to sit and rest something. We want it to break down. So maybe we have to start with something simple and gradually convert into more of a slow burning or slower digesting carbohydrate, depending on how our gut adapts to it. And again, depends on our sport. We definitely want to make sure we get to where we are bringing in the whole grains for endurance activities because we need that longevity. And when we talk about the whole grains, that's where we really want to make sure, especially after your workouts and even on your off days. Whole grains typically are very, 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 very low in sugar. So we don't have to worry about that, blood sugars level jumping up, or even when it comes to weight gain, because we're not bringing in sugar, we're bringing in more fiber and more nutrients, which is going to help to replenish our body stores. What collects help over sometimes extra fat tissue, or sometimes we find ourselves gaining fat weight. Sometimes we bring in too much sugar. So we're going to make sure that we're balancing that and bringing in simple sugars when we need it. But for the most part, knowing the most prominent time is to get those healthy whole grains in, and knowing when to have them, which is typically after your workout, if you're having, or if you're in endurance sport. So let's think about traveling when we're not home. What can we put together that we can keep with us when we're away going for a game, or if we're, let's say, at a tournament? We want to make sure we have those appropriate fueling sources. I always say some quick things is, having an oatmeal. You can always buy the packets of oatmeal or buy the cups of oatmeal. You add warm water to it. We can do cereal. We can have dried cereal and just bring you some milk. We don't have to have the whole cereal bowl and all of those things. You can still kind of do in 2-in-1. Pretzels are great. I like pretzels because they're light. I like to have the sodium in. It helps with water retention so I don't dehydrate. Graham crackers is pretty, it's more sweet, but it's not like a cookie. So you do have, you don't have as much of a sweet, cracker version, but you can also couple that with a little peanut butter too. Granola, we can do loose granola, we can do granola bars. That's a complex carbohydrate. It sustains us longer. I like popcorn. We sometimes misunderstand popcorn. Popcorn is a whole grain. It's high in fiber. When we put too much different ingredients on top of, then that's where it can get to where it isn't healthy for us. So if you buy a bag of air popcorn and take it with you, that's a great, nice, easy, tasty snack that you can have. Peanut butter and fruit. Apples and peanut butters, bananas and peanut butters. I love those combinations, and not even limited to peanut butter. We can do any type of nut butter to your desire. The point is you want it more of a nut fat is where we're going to. So you can diversify that peanut butter, some other nut butter. Trail mix is easy too. We can put in little packets. Again, you have the combination of your nuts and your dried fruit. Those are the combination of the fat with the fruit helps to break that fruit down a little bit slower. So again, these are quick snacks, and most of them are non-perishable. So you can take them with you. You don't have to worry about them going bad or spoiling. So these are some nice non-perishable snacks that you can have traveling with you. So here's a quick protein shake. I like protein shakes because it gets the job done. It's tasty. It digests quickly, and I feel good knowing that I got at least I got a good amount of protein in a meal within 5 minutes. The base of a protein powder or a protein smoothie would be the protein powder, and either fat-free milk, fat-free milk, chocolate milk. Fat-free chocolate milk actually is a really good protein source. So if you like chocolate milk, this is the time to use it. The frozen banana gives it those carbohydrates. You're also getting some other nutrients from that banana. You're getting a whole food. Even just that combination, just the banana, the chocolate milk, and your protein powder of your desire, and mix it with some ice, you got a nice little frothy, almost like a frappuccino, but it's a protein shake. And I think that can be very, very appetizing and convenient in a quick way, again, to get that protein in and those simple carbs. So that's good. That's a good option to use. And then the question is when. You can definitely want to use it behind the workout. But let's say you are getting ready to work out too, and you need something. Well, this is a nice combination to sip on before you work out too, because it breaks down fast in your system, and it can convert over to glucose, and it has a lot of liquid in it. So again, it can be easier in your stomach. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of some case studies. So we have this young lady here, Mary. She plays soccer, and she's doing 2-a-days now. And so she's younger, she's a freshman, and she's not used to preparing her own meals. So now she's trying to figure out how am I going to be, in the high school level, playing 2 times a day in soccer, which I'm outside. In soccer, you're just not sitting around, you're constantly moving. So she brings, her house of breakfast before her first practice, and then she eats lunch. But she still finds she's pretty hungry after that second practice, which is, pretty important to make sure you have that feeling for the second round. So the question is, in this situation, I'm sure some of you, your athletes, or your children, or you athletes as yourself on here, you probably have encountered this before. And in that situation, what would you do? What would Mary do to avoid feeling hungry during practice? And yes, the answer is If she's already had lunch, then what does she probably need right after lunch or between lunch and practice? She needs that snack, right? And then probably what kind of snack does she need? Most likely need, if she's doing outside, she's doing 2-a-day, she's probably at a more level of heavy training. So she's gonna need something heavier. So when we go back and look at some of those options we talked about having a sandwich, having a deli sandwich. We talked about having, let's see, what else we talked about having? Having fruit and peanut and nut butter. We need something a little bit more heavier now to help not just for the fueling now, but to also replenish what she lost in her first practice of that day, but also give her enough energy so she have enough for the practice. That's the second practice happened. So we got like a twofold. So that's one reason we need a heavier snacks, because we're sufficing the needs of both activities now, not just one. And again, we just talked about, and I'll go back and look through some of those slides to show you. Matter of fact, I jumped back to that day for the heavy snacks. That's what she probably needs, a heavy snack. So let's say she could use the quinoa with the fruit or the cheese and crackers or like a sandwich. She's gonna need something heavier to, again, to suffice her needs for her second practice, but also to make sure she replenishes and keeping up with her nutritional and energy needs from the last practice. So we have one more case study. Case study number 2, we have Jacob. He's a basketball player and he trains heavy all throughout the week. But during his rest days, he just does stretching and active recovery. So he has heavy days and now he has rest days. So he wants to make sure that he's eating enough. So he eats, 3 meals a day, 3 snacks. Great. He's doing everything he needs to do to suffice that training. But however, on his days off, he's been feeling, very full and sluggish on his days off. So what does that mean? That means Jacob's probably eating the same way he eats on training days and off days. So again, as athletes, we need to know when to drop down our eating and our snacking, depends on our activity level. So now the question is, why is he feeling why is he feeling sluggish? Well, because he's having probably 3 meals and probably 3 snacks. Is there anything wrong with having 3 meals, 3 snacks? No, it isn't. But maybe the types of snacks is what we can lower and make them more lighter. So, okay, that's how we can readjust his meals for his recovery days. So then the next question is, what kind of snacks should he eat? So let's scroll back a couple of slides and we look at the light snacks. He may should start focusing some on fruits, just having fruits during the days he's off, grabbing some Greek yogurt cups, making sure he has, some beans or some black beans on his plate when he's eating. Make sure he gets veggies. And nothing wrong with snacking on veggies. Dip the veggies in like a hummus or dip it in like a ranch dip or something. But the idea is that understanding he doesn't really need that amount of fueling on days he's not going to work out. He's recovering now. He still needs to make sure you have the protein, the carbohydrates, and things like that. But his snacks needs to dial down a little bit because he's not working it off. He doesn't need those extra calories. And those calories are meant to provide fueling. So if you're not exercising, you're not practicing, you don't really need the fueling. So again, that's how we understand how to use snacks, the timing and the types and the amounts of snacking. So a couple of frequently asked questions is, how should I eat a snack before a workout? Well, I just said earlier, let's focus on, sometimes we're having simple carb, but simple carbs is like fruit, we don't really want to have too many heavy complex carbohydrates because it may not break down in time. But we want to make sure we have it anywhere from 45 to 15 minutes before our activity. Again, depends on what kind of activity that we're doing. That's to answer the question, how soon should you eat after working out? Well, research said, there's a window, a time where after you work out, your muscles are, they're more primed to be ready to accept nourishment to rehealing. So they say it's like a 45-minute window that you really want to have that a good high profile protein source in along with some carbohydrates. So you do want to make sure you capitalize on that 45-minute window, but you also want to capitalize on eating throughout the day around your exercise activity. So let's think about when you work out, you shred muscle tissue. You need something to help repair it. So you need to repair it throughout the day, not just right afterwards. So you have intentional protein and carbohydrate sources after you work out, but throughout the day, you want to still make sure you're getting an influx of the healthy protein and the healthy carbohydrates, because that's what's going to keep helping it to heal and prepare yourself for next time you work out. What are some high protein snacks? Some of the ones we talked about was like our protein shakes. We talk about the extreme cheese sticks and crackers. We talk about the sandwich meat, the sandwich chicken, chicken or some sort of meat with some sort of cheese and deli meat. That's a high protein source. Couple of boiled eggs are high protein sources. Your Greek yogurts is a high protein source. Anybody like cottage cheese, that's a high protein source. Even think about like beef jerky, lean beef jerky, that's a high protein source. So there's anything animal based, your deli meats, those are all high protein source. For those who are more vegetarian based, you want to focus on like your beans. Those are nice. That's a higher amount of protein in that. You have other things like tofu, edamame, and even have like vegetarian plant-based protein powders, plant-based protein bars. So there's still opportunity to get in a good amount of protein, depends on whatever your diet is. How much do you portion your snacks? You portion accordingly to your needs. If you're having a low workout day, you have something like fruit, have some crackers here and there, a little bit of popcorn. But if you're having something heavier, now we need to make sure we have more whole foods, more heavier foods, because again, we want to make sure that we're sufficing our energy needs so we can perform better for activity. And what if you don't have time to eat a snack? Well, that's where we have pre-planning. I always say, if you like protein bars, if you put some in your backpack, have like little protein powders that you keep with you, put in your backpack, and just find you some milk and make your proteins, make your little homemade protein shake. When you stop at the gas station, pick up a protein shake. There are some ways, if you don't have time, there's some quick ways things you can do to make sure that you're still getting those needs, because you still, no matter what, you don't care if you got 5 minutes between getting out of school and practice, you got to eat something in between. So we got to figure out how can we get something in that short period of window, because if not, your workout is not going to be at the level that you want it to be, which when your training is not going to be there, with your ability to increase your skill set, it's not going to be there because we're not optimizing our nutrition to optimize our performance. Are sports drinks okay? A good snack option? It's a good snack. It's a good hydration option, especially like, your light Gatorades or your light Powerades. It's not, it has some carbohydrates in it and electrolytes. It may not suffice your energy needs, but it helps keep you hydrated. So you definitely want something probably with the sports drink. So maybe a piece of fruit with the sports drink, a banana with the sports drink, a handful of, some pretzels with the sports drink. So you probably want to combine it with something else and not just have it on its own. So we're getting ready to close out. A couple of action steps, things to think about is prioritizing your snacking throughout the day, preparing for a pre and post workout snack, adjust your snacks based on light, moderate, and heavy training. Know when to choose simple sugars, know when to choose whole grains, and make sure to always have your snacks with you no matter where you're at, so that you always have a form of fueling. So you can definitely learn more about what's considered healthy snacking for healthy athletes by looking at this QR code. I'm going to give you guys a few moments, take a quick picture of it, make sure you bring your phone to it so you can see where to go. And this could provide you with some more options, some more ways that you can bring in those healthy snacks depending on your sport. I'm going to close with one quote. The only person who can stop you from reaching your goals is you. And that was said by Jackie Joyner-Kersee. And we know where her track record is, no pun intended, with her success. But when it comes to how are you going to be a better athlete, the best athlete you want to be for yourself, what are you doing to advocate for yourself? What are you doing that is going to help you outside of your coaching, that's your coaches and your teammates? What are you doing on your own to help you be the person that you want to be in regards to your sports? And I told you I live here in St. Louis, and me being a sports dietitian, I'm really good friends with Jackie Joyner-Kersee. So I think I took that maybe a couple of years ago. So I thought that was a nice little touch to, the reality of, she's a person, she's a human, and these are the words that comes out of her mouth as an athlete. So as for closing, I see we have a few questions. Here are some of our references where we got our information. So feel free to take a quick picture of that and go to some of those links, and it'll give you more insights on where we got our information from. So let me answer a couple of these questions. So someone says, what is your general baseline recommendation for fat percentage athletes diet, and what factors drives it up and down? Well, it all depends on where you're at right now as an athlete, as far as what is your body composition. Then what type of sport are you wanting to play? If you're doing something like, gymnastics or swimming, you need something leaner. If you're doing something like, football or, some sort of more impact sport, you're going to have the higher fat percentage. So that's actually an individual question. But that's what drives those factors up and down. Where you're at now, what are your body changes go, depending on what you want to do in your sport. And that when it comes to your eating, then your food is gauged off of that. So that's more of an individual thing. It's not a universal recommendation for that. Depends on the sport, the athlete's gender, their position, and where they're already at right now as for their body composition. Someone said, why would you want to higher protein pre-workout snacks? Well, you got to think about what having you want a high amount, but do you want protein? Yeah, because you're finna tear your protein now. So you still need like a little bit of buffer to where there are some amino acids still coming in that can still help it's best to replenish as you're tearing it. Again, you don't want to eat protein and work out because that could provide the energy you need. Carbohydrates what provides the energy, but the protein coming in, the amino acids, that kind of what helps buffer so that your muscle tissue is still getting some form of protein coming into the system in the same simultaneous while it's tearing down. So that's the reason why. Yeah, I think I answered that question correctly as far as what you were asking. So yes, that's where you want, that's when you do want to bring protein in, but again, it's not a heavy focus. It just needs to be considered, especially when you're doing like resistance training or high level activity, because you are using muscle. So we can bring some amino acids to help offset that a little bit. Okay, is there any more questions before we jump off? I do appreciate you all being a part of this. I hope that there were some valuable information, some insights, and some steps to help you in your own respective athletic activity so that you can be the best athlete that you want to be. Any more questions? I'll be on here for maybe a minute, and then I will jump off, and then that would be it. All right, have a question. Someone said, thank you. You're so welcome. So welcome. All right. Okay, everyone. Well, enjoy the rest of your evening. Again, this is My Sports Dietitian. We're a team of sports dietitians that work specifically with athletes. So you go to our website, learn more about us, and we're going to always have these webinars up coming up in July a lot more frequently. So stay in tune. And there are going to be many more topics related to sports activities that can help you, your athletes, yourself as athlete, or your kids as athletes. Have a great night and talk soon.